Hello, Gino here, and you are listening to Otherworld Connections. We live in a critical time where now, more than ever, angels and fairies, hidden forces, are bursting at the seams of the veil to work with us. They want to see us change in order to save the world and live in service to others. So join me on a journey to empowerment and enlightenment with an angelic angle and a fairy focus, looking into ways to improve our current situation, morality, archetypes, solutions for self-healing, and spiritual sciences in light of theosophy and other occult traditions.
Hello, welcome back to Otherworld Connections. Today's show, we are continuing the Initiatory path in fairy tales. The book by Bernard Roger. He's got two first names. And let's get the publishing and everything right. The Alchemical Secrets of Mother Goose, Bernard Roger, translated by John E. Graham from French into English. And that's published by Inner Traditions. And it's the book that I didn't think I would ever find. So we're going through everything there. Just a reminder that you can find the link to anything I read, which will just be this one book today, in the description of this episode once it's published on my website, thesecretkindergarten.com, and of course on all YouTube, blah, 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 blah. Otherworldconnections.substack.com. Have you been on Substack? It's pretty interesting, especially if you like, well, reading. You might be surprised who's on there. Publishing to very few, potentially quite a few, fewer people than you thought, because it's still a growing thing. Check it out. Odyssey, Rumble, and on the main podcast platforms. Do you think Rumble is really full of people that woke up during COVID? Baby boomers? Oh, that's my thought, based on the comments I receive. So let's figure out what to do, what is better to do, how to heal, how to change, how to achieve goals, and live successful lives of service by making these otherworld connections. And one of the ways of making these otherworld connections, as I blah, blah, blah all the time on all my stuff, is through fairy tales. Fairy tales have the keys to the truth of our reality, as in how we are supposed to live, what is right, what is wrong, objective morality, natural law, so on and so forth. It's there in the fairy tales, and fairy tales are just, I'm flabbergasted. The more I go into fairy tales, the more I am flabbergasted. Because a fairy tale says, really, the concept of a fairy tale is a story written in a way that is suitable for the education of the young child, because direct instruction of the young child is called indoctrination, guys, and we are not to indoctrinate the truths of our reality, the spiritual truths, through direct instruction, because that's what is not good. I keep saying, and I would stop saying it if everybody didn't think otherwise, but it's true. Indirect instruction, fantasy, freedom, as in just all good, it's all good, that sort of thing. So the point is that the fairy tale has, at face value, the instruction for the child through a fantasy story. And the job for the adult is to understand symbolism and decode and understand the meaning of the tale and live according to that. And so it is the keystone of a free society. At least it was, in my opinion, which is, well, we're 32 episodes in, most of that on fairy tales. In my opinion, that's how successful, free, societies without government were holding their stuff together through fairy tale reading, perhaps with the whole community around a bonfire. I don't know exactly, but something like that, because we know that the initiation of the child to 7 years old was arguably the biggest initiation ritual that the whole community got involved in ancient times. So young children were certainly held in high regard, and I think this reverence for young children is part of how fairy tales came about, and definitely as per the my work on the Secret Kindergarten is to show you how you can get your magical psychic powers through just exercising and testing your patience, or having your patience tested by the kids. So get involved with the kids, that's what I'm saying, and you will get closer to where you were born to go. Was that a dramatic pause or a brain freeze? I'll leave that for you to decide. Now, let's read. So, we are up to the chapter of the candidate for initiation, also known in the fairy tales, right? So Mr. Bernard Roger, why do I always get his name mixed up? It's two first names. And I'm having a moment anyway, you know. Bernard Roger. Bernie. Okay. Here known as Bernie. So Bernie says in this chapter he's outlining the candidate for initiation, or this, and he puts in brackets, or the subject of this book. The subject being the initiate, or the initiation of the initiate, which is his decoding of fairy tales. And in this chapter, he breaks down the common archetypes of the protagonist, the main character. So we went through the character who is on society's margins. That is a common theme of the protagonist in fairy tales. The youngest son. That is loads of the stories we've gone through on Otherworld Connections and the Secret Kindergarten involve the protagonist as the youngest son. I don't think I've read any of the protagonists being one with birthmarks. One with a birthmark. But we covered that. And now we're up to, which is pretty deep here, sold to the dark man. Let's get into it. Through ruse, but also in return for money or other remuneration, a being of darkness obtains from a man the promise to hand over his own son. In The King of the Golden Mountain, this is done when the child reaches the age of puberty. Did I read this last week? Well, we're doing it again anyway. While in The Wondrous Wand, it is when he reaches the age of majority. Perhaps the mention of these stages of life reveals a recollection of ancient rites of passage, but the position and relationship of the child to his father place this dramatic event in a particular context. For the boy sold for the profit of his father is not informed of his fate until the moment he is handed over to the stranger. Imagine that. Are we playing that out on a miniature scale? Easy for me to say this, right? You guys know I don't have kids, right? When we drop our kid off at the daycare, some children definitely play into this archetype and fall into this archetype, and maybe in about 5 years' time, I'll be able to eloquate exactly what's going on there and how to solve it. No one will listen to me, but that's okay. It's just the right thing to do. Oh, man. All right, let's just keep going. Come on. For the boy, he's not informed of his fate, yeah. Yet it is from that moment that he goes of his own free will to accept his destiny. the Freudian school did not fail to find an allusion to the intervention of the superego, the booming paternal voice, in the behavior of these young men. A yet more obvious intervention connected with the well-known theme of murdering the father can be found in the wondrous wand. Here, Benedict, several days before the fateful day of his 20th birthday, is perplexed by the sorrow his father has exhibited since the day of his birth. "Why is my father always grieving?" he asked his tutor. "If you want to know," his teacher replied, "ask your father to walk with you to the woods, and once you get there, ask him the cause of his sorrow. If he refuses to tell you, threaten that you will blow his brains out and then blow out your own." Good night, little Timmy. For Benedict, kids don't care about that. Seriously, they do not care. That's why you got to read the unexpunged versions of fairy tales. For Benedict, the conflict was resolved once he had followed this advice and received the answer he was waiting for. Now free, he could, in full awareness, embrace the dangerous adventure to which his father's encounter had destined him. He could now take his own measure against the dark man, whom the Christianization of the story often portrayed as the devil. This is the adversary that must be overcome, the stumbling block or stone of scandal, the builder must make the cornerstone of his planned building. All right. I think I might have read that last week. And then the soldier. I don't think we covered any soldiers in fairy tales, but the soldier La Ramée. I can literally say pardon my French today. Pardon my French. Whether they are strapping swashbucklers or old crippled drunks, deserters or honorably discharged, the soldier La Ramée and his colleagues are dropouts. They have been excluded. Yay, dropouts. Yeah, drop out. I dropped out of everything. All right. They have been excluded from the hierarchized society in which they had a place and could make a living. At the onset of an initiatory progression, the position of the candidate who has been called can be similar to when his social milieu reveals itself unfit for providing the food his spirit demands. Then finding himself indigent or disabled, he becomes the architect of his own exclusion. Moved by the desire for a larger world, he can be induced to look for where to knock on the door of the temple. The practitioners of the art of Hermes, for their part, would focus on the martial nature of this man of war. But the name La Ramée, which has often been given to this soldier, contributes a detail that concerns the domains of alchemy and initiation equally. A leafy bow, a ramée, can refer to the interlaced branches of a tree as well as the leafy vault of a woodland through which the sun rays gently pierce, as once extolled in the octosyllabic verse of an old refrain, which is written in French. So I'm just, okay. Oh, Magali. Ma bien. Ami. It's not ami. Allons tous deux sous la ramée, au fond du bois silencieux. That wasn't too bad. That was not too bad. Here's to my 2 years of sleeping in French class. This, in my teenage years, this ramée can also be a branch cut with all its green shoots that, when stuck in the ground at the right time, will find the way to set down its roots in order to become A large tree. The name La Ramée heralds a character predisposed to fertile rejuvenations, and this is probably one of the reasons why, in Europe, the spring holiday of Palm Sunday was considered by the children of Hermes, the alchemists, as the most propitious day of the year on which to begin their works. Well, yeah. All sort of affirming. Okay, so the poor man's son. I've definitely read a few fairy tales where the protagonist is the poor man's son. These are the humble, which is to say the individuals who have remained close to the soil. The raw stones for whom every shape and determination remains in the domain of possibility. In the King of England and his godson, it was in the innocence of the cradle that Eugene received the name of well-born from a king of the land of Angles, who had become lost in a strange countryside while pursuing a bird of an unknown species. This king had been made welcome into the rustic cabin of the humble family where the child was born, who became the king's godson. The corpus of fairy tales is a kaleidoscope in the beautiful multicolored, I've said mandala, in the beautiful multicolored images that can be seen forming when the device is turned in a certain way. Characters are reflected behind whom a Masonic lodge can recognize a candidate for initiation, and in whom an alchemist, a practitioner of the art of Hermes, can see the signs beneath which he will find the mineral matter suitable for his work. And we don't need the Masonic Lodge to do this ourselves. And yeah, if you initiate yourself, well, okay, you can do that. It might be quite lonely. But hey, you'll be alright, you'll be looked after, don't worry about it. The heroes in these tales are close to the source of life. Primitives, men of the woods, in the prime of youth, simple-minded. They are eager for another world toward which Mercury is the ferryman. Humble, for they sense that all light comes from on high. They hold the key that opens the door of the large rock. I am compelled here. The large rock in which brigands have imprisoned them. Or it could be that of a certain invisible castle. They head off for adventures in which they run the risk of going astray, haunted by the feeling of owing a debt to night's domain, or exalted by their love for an unknown beauty whose image they caught in a furtive glimpse. Considered by their families or societies as moronic, abnormal, or marginal individuals, in truth they are moved by a quality of empathy beneath which we feel the attraction toward what Jung called the self, which long before him Masonic symbolism had placed in the middle chamber. In the alchemical discipline, the root of the metal is vile and despised. Yet it is the foundation for the work. It lacks any specific qualities and extends toward the universal, which must be gold. The gold path. Alright. Now we're on to the girls. The sexual symbolism of the racy couplet that the 7 boys sing at the beginning of The Little Sister and the Handsome Brother is unambiguous. If the flail beats, it will be a boy. If the distaff spins, it will be a girl. But the manure pile in which the distaff is stuck cannot help be seen as a sign of their fairly detestable scorn of young girls. This agrarian joke probably raised the rafters of yesterday's farm with the hearty laughter of the men and was received with an indulgent shrug by the women. And you'll find, well, we have found, I probably haven't covered it too much, but in a lot of these books written by researchers of fairy tales, a number of them make that the basis of what fairy tales are, just agrarian jokes, and actually parlor jokes, like rude jokes that have been, and also tidied up, cleaned up a little bit to make them, cleaned up by women to make them more appealing. And that is something we're going to look into. Actually, in the show previous on Crosstalk, they were talking about neo-feminism and this imbalance between masculinity and femininity, and that is actually in play in a lot of the books. So I've had to waste a lot of time reading books that haven't really been so helpful, but they highlight a dynamic that is something that needs to be talked about and addressed. But to say that all fairy tales have just been tidied up and they don't really have any other meaning otherwise, just some ladies that thought better for the kids changed them a little bit. But you know what? That is what is going on. That's censorship, right? And that's the whole point of what we're doing here, is to de-censor the fairy tales in our hearts and minds, and to try and get back to feeling that connection with original fairy tales and all their blood, guts, and I don't know, misogyny perhaps. So let's see. Behind the vulgar rusticity, the appearance of the manure, alright, we're talking about the distaff stuck in the manure. The pile is not devoid of meaning. So yes, of course. So this is the whole point why all the stuff that was contained in the fairy tales is something to be decoded for the adults and something to be as part of the fantasy story for kids at face value. So everyone loses if you change them. Everyone loses. Okay, so the land is spread with manure or smoked to make it fertile. We need only recall that for millennia, the earth and the woman have been found in the same symbolic category for the majority of people. For the role given to the manure pile, in which the distaff is spinning, is revealed as that of giver of life. It also reveals, underneath the indelicate bawdiness of the story, how the evocation of their earth and woman's mysterious ability to create life has never ceased to fascinate men. Prehistoric men have passed down the evidence of this fascination in the images of the naked goddesses, to which Jean Przlewski, I got it, believes they attributed a power in the fertility of the living world. This is a quote. Mana was only conceived as a physical agent, just as a ray of light projected on a certain point determines a rise in temperature. The mana emanating from the genetrix, particularly from her breasts and sex organ, is a source of abundance and prosperity. The naked statuette, with its legs spread, acts as a mana projector. So this is a great example of what's in the original fairy tale should stay, because the manure, it's not an agrarian joke for the women, to describe the women. It's actually symbolic of the creative power of woman and the earth. Just a crude paraphrasing there. Hey guys, I got to press pause for a minute. My apologies. There are things going on behind the scenes here at Otherworld Connections headquarters. We got all kinds of work being done on the property, and all these people are willing to do all these kind of favors, and I'm sort of like, I can't do that right now. I'm just sitting at the computer. So just give me a few minutes. I will put some background music on. Oh gosh, bear with me. Okay. That's the background music for the B segment on the kids show that I do on Saturdays, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, Studio A, Revolution Radio. Yeah, that was just on the fly act of desperation there. False alarm, so we're going to get interrupted again at some point between now and the top of the hour. Apologies for that. We're getting the driveway. We're doing the driveway, and we're doing it obviously on the smell of an oily rag, and it's just really nice. Like the landscaping guy with his excavator is just coming down when he has the time to do it, and he's just making it super cheap, and it's like, it really makes me feel part of a community here. And it's really nice to meet people that are nice when you're nice to them. And that is the springboard for a society that everyone wants to live in, which is usually, going to be a free society. And then when you're nice to people and they're nice to you, and then when someone's not nice, well, then you have something to compare it to. Does that make sense? So then you know. And that's what's important for the kids too. To be nice and kind, and then when something not nice and not kind is going on, then they know it's not good. And they need to be supported to do something about it, which is really the key to the education of the child. All right. And to to a free society. So what am I talking about here? What are we? We're talking about Mana. Jean Przylewski. Oh, that was pretty good. Okay. Power in the fertility of the living world. And, okay, the women embody that. So, it's not an agrarian joke. Okay, fairy tales are no joke. Here we go. Could the loss of an ancient intimacy with nature be the reason why the universal symbol was reduced in the tales to the agrarian reality of the utilitarian manure pile? Behind this rustic avatar, however, an image remains hidden, on the trail of which, at the crossroads of an analogy with the mineral world, can be revealed secrets about a certain fire, without whose help the practice of alchemy would remain futile. Hey, another thing, I'm just going back to this whole community thing. It's like, I went to the shop to get the gate. So we need to put a gate up, a driveway entrance gate. So we got a sort of dare gate. Anyway, Steve, the guy there, was like, oh, so you're going to be digging a hole to put the post on? I was like, yeah. And he said, I love digging holes. I'd love to come and help you. I didn't know what to say. Do you get what I'm saying? It's just not every day you meet people that are enthusiastic and, what's the word? They're not playing games with what they're saying. What comes out of their mouth is just what they're genuinely feeling and interested in at the time. They're not trying to play status games. They're not trying to work on their vocal inflection to sound like they're more dominant than you. They're just, hey, yeah, cool. I love digging holes and I'm keen to come and help. I mean, obviously he's probably going to, I'll probably give him some money, right? I mean, that's the right thing to do, but do you get what I mean? And that's where we're at today. So that's where the interruptions are coming. Steve, the passionate hole digger, wanted to come half an hour ago, and I said, I'm kind of busy, which is, that was heartbreaking, but I don't want to cancel this. So yeah, I don't know why I'm telling you guys this, but just, it's nice to meet good people, and it creates that sort of sense of unification that we know is there, but we don't have to just keep reading about it in books. That's what I'm saying. All right. Le Cosmopolite, Michael Sendivogius writes, "The wise man will find our stone even in the dung heap, while the ignorant will not believe that it is in gold." Dom Pernity reminds us that in the language of the adepts, horse dung designates the stone in the black state. In other words, at the central phase of the great work called putrefaction, destruction, or conversion, other texts explicitly instruct that the compost should be cooked at the temperature of this dung heap, underscoring the power of its inner secret force. It is precisely a fire whose function is analogous, the artisan of every change of state, which is designated under this rustic image at the beginning of this tale from Neve. Ardent and occult, it hatches in the center of female nature, which earns her the aggressive distrust of the male gender, as well as its boundless adulation. And I wonder if all these issues that, I guess what we want to get to the bottom of and be able to say, this is how you solve this with this fairy tale, is, I just wonder, like fairy tales possibly have, I think, the solutions to all these problems we have, like this neo-feminism thing, this man versus woman thing. I think all these big they're paradigms that we're living in, really, that these points of view that are archetypal and also destructive, they're starting to appear to be addressed in all the fairy tales too. Not in all of them, but out of all the fairy tales, certain things that we have to deal with are addressed in certain stories. And I suspect that the solution lies in the reading and the understanding of them. Chaos was first of all, but next appeared broad-bosomed earth. But next appeared broad-bosomed earth, sure standing place for all the gods who live on snowy Olympus's peak and misty Tartarus in a recess of broad-pathed earth, and love most beautiful of all the deathless gods. He makes men weak, he overpowers the clever mind, and tames the spirit in the breasts of men and gods. The woman is an initiator by nature because she carries in her secret innermost depths this fire, which is also a stone of scandal, sometimes called infernal fire, and not without reason, as according to Hesiod, who calls it Eros, it is the issue of chaos and the earth, and rules as master from within her womb. The rest of the story of the little sister and the handsome brother confirms this vocation, because when she turns 7, the little girl sets off in search of her missing brothers. But later in the story, when through clumsiness she loses the fire she guarded, the 7 boys, whom she had since found, are transformed into animals. In the majority of tales in which the main character is a woman, her essential role consists of imposing tests on a male partner. It is to find Sleeping Beauty that a prince travels through an impassable forest, and another, seeking to free Rapunzel, is struck by thorns that put out his eyes. We know the man who fell sick with love for donkey skin almost died. The Frog King, thrown violently against a wall by a delightful princess, regains his human form thanks to this act. The 12 brothers are threatened with death by the birth of their sister and flee the palace. In Sweetheart Roland is transformed into a lake by his fiancée. A brave boy is sent toward the worst dangers by a maiden, changed into a raven. From the moment when he first met her, following a path in a dark forest, he decided to free her. But it is often the girls who suffer the worst abuse. The century-long slumber of Sleeping Beauty is a mirror of the death that Snow White experiences when she eats the red apple. Rapunzel has been imprisoned since the age of 12 by a witch inside a tower that stood with no door or stairs in the center of a forest. The Princess Donkey Skin, fleeing her father's advances, leaves her native land and is reduced to the level of a slattern in the lower courtyard of a castle. In the Auvergne story, The Red Mountain, the daughter of the terrible lord of the Red Castle, the beautiful Aurore, allows herself to be cooked in a pot and dismembered by Jean, so that this valiant lad can make a ladder from her bones, with which to scale the glass mountain, at the top of which he has to destroy an eagle's nest. The same thing happens to the devil's daughter in the tale from Saint-Mard-la-Brie, The Green Mountain. In the Gascony story, The Stepmother, a young girl who has set off to marry a king is compelled, during her trip, to gouge out her own eyes and give them to her stepmother's daughter, who then has her thrown into a bog. Other themes tell the story of a maiden whose own mother, stepsister, or the devil in person has her hands or arms cut off. In Marie de la Chambre du Bois, Marie of the Thatched Cottage in the Wood, a girl after marrying a king is no better treated by her own sister, who cruelly mutilates her. Eglantine must also go through many harsh ordeals after crossing through a beautiful but slightly rusted metal gate that lets her enter the forest, beyond which she is reckless enough to pick a red rose in very poor condition. The cat Beaumignon, her saviour, would find her half nude, scorched, deaf and dumb, with eyes stubbornly squeezed shut. Wow, I gotta get me this fairy tale. The most famous of these victims is, of course, the heroine of Little Red Riding Hood, swallowed up in a single gulp by the wolf that had already eaten her grandmother before disguising itself as her. The Little Red Riding Hood, in fact, constitutes quite a noteworthy case. In the grim version, her adventure is akin in a certain way to that of Sleeping Beauty. The young traveller goes through the woods and is not crunched up, as could be feared, but swallowed whole and finds herself undamaged in the wolf's belly, just like Sleeping Beauty inside her deep sleep. A French folk version which takes her to a crossroads where she has to choose between two directions: the path of needles and the path of pins underscores a common point between the young girl's drama and that of the sleeping princess. These two tools, like the spindle that pricked Sleeping Beauty, have sharp points, and all three are used in sewing work. It seems that the girl's choice of the path of pins is less an allusion to her laziness, as one psychological interpretation would have it, than to her ignorance of spinning, which connects her again to the king's daughter, climbing from room to room up to a small garret at the top of the keep where an old crone was spinning alone at the distaff. And here too occurs another event that connects the two heroines, the encounter with an old woman that plays a decisive role in each of their fates. The spinner in Sleeping Beauty and the grandmother in Little Red Riding Hood. The grandmother who is sewing a beautiful red garment in her cabin deep in the depths of the woods, and the extremely ancient and forgotten spinner in the castle attic, both are leading the girls on the trail of the great mother, whose memory looms up from the Paleolithic mists. She is the genetrix who spins beings, gods and mortals alike, and for whom devotion has spanned millennia, during which time her worshippers called her Mother Earth Cybele, Astarte, or Aphrodite, as well as Helen, the Virgin Mary, or Nature, and countless other names. When she awoke from her century-long slumber, Sleeping Beauty had gone past the age of a great-grandmother, while remaining in the prime of her youth. Perrault stresses this is with a little wink. The prince helped the princess to get up, he says. She was dressed, and most magnificently, but he refrained from telling her that she was dressed like her grandmother. The heroine of Little Red Riding Hood, for her part, will be commingled in the wolf's stomach with her grandmother. And when she is brought back into the light at the same time as the old woman, she finds herself suddenly endowed with a wisdom that she had scant acquaintance with before her adventure. Never again, as long as you live, will you leave the path to go running through the forest as your mother forbid you, she tells herself, once she has emerged from the gulf that could have swallowed her up forever. At the end of their ordeals, both young girls are marked with the sign of the Great Mother, or perhaps the Grandmother. The two tales teach that a woman is initiated, which is to say, put on the proper path for her female nature, when she is fully conscious that she is originally identical with this great initiator. There is no one familiar with traditional alchemy texts who can hear or read a tale of marvels without recognizing in the unfolding of the plot frequent analogies with that of the operations of the great work, over the course of which an agent and a patient will clash. The authors refer to these two respectively, depending on the circumstances, as sulphur and mercury, sun and moon, man and woman, king and queen. This couple can be found in all fairy tales without exception. Whether they involve a prince and a princess, a king and a shepherd girl, or quite simply a boy and a girl. The cruel ordeals that the heroines undergo find their exact correspondences in the torments that, according to the testimony of the practitioners, Mercury suffers for the liberation of its partner, sulphur, during the course of the mineral process. The instructions that the Devil's Daughter gives to her companion in the Green Mountain for destroying her body are echoed by those for making the alchemists matter at the beginning of Jacques Le Tesson's L'œuvre du lion vert, the work of the green lion. Here is how she addresses him under the appearance of a green lion with 6 horns and 6 ears, who was full of quick water. You must realize that I have come down from the celestial regions and fallen into these so-called concave caverns of the earth, nourished myself here for a time, and desire nothing more than to return. And the means to do this is that you should kill me and then resuscitate me. It's another common theme. Common motive in fairy tales, and with the reincarnation, basically, and with the instrument you use to kill me, you shall resuscitate me. For as the white dove says, he who kills me gives me life. You shall warm me without any violence, with a heat suitable to cause my death, for there is nothing save that which can kill me, and it must be a languorous, not sudden death, for that would be damnable. For her part, the devil's blonde daughter from the Green Mountain gave the following instructions to the young man who had recklessly lent his services to her father, and who remained powerless and desperate at the foot of the mountain, slippery as crystal, from whose peak he had to bring back 3 turtle-dove eggs. Listen, I am going to tell you of a matter that is quite difficult. Here is a pot I have brought you. Fill it with water and make a good fire beneath it, and put me in, 1 piece at a time, to boil. You will then take my bones and remove the flesh, and you will stick 1 bone at a time in the mountain to use as a ladder. With all my bones you will reach the top. Once the operation was concluded, the climber came back down and needed only place the bones back to boil in the pot for the blonde girl to come back to life, joyful and more beautiful than ever, ready to marry her dismembering hero. In all tales of wonders and in all initiatory journeys and during the course of the mineral great work, 2 protagonists are present, a male and a female. At the commencement of an initiation, as at the beginning of the great work, we could say that the male plays the role of impassioned agent and the female that of the active patient. This couple forms the prime matter of alchemy. It is also found in the mind of the individual to be initiated, whether man or woman. But the ways that are propitious for women are not the same as those that are suitable for men. And there ends that chapter. And I do wonder that so far we've kind of done, it's been a lot of sort of train spotting, right? He's highlighted trends, for lack of a better term, motifs, that sort of thing that are found in fairy tales, and he's associated them with, oh, that's in alchemy, that's in Freemasonry. And here at Otherworld Connections, we're about the so then what? Okay, so now what? We want to make it practical. So yeah, we obviously haven't finished reading the book, but hey, we've actually got through quite a lot. Am I speaking too soon? Yeah, so as of now, if you have been following this journey of discovery of, the esoterica of fairy tales, you'd be with me in saying that, Rudolf Steiner so far seems to be the authority on what's what. And we may not need to go much further than that, but nevertheless we are to be sure of what we're doing is right. And in the future we will continue to figure out what fairy tales are saying with the understanding of the stuff in this book. We're going to figure out what the fairy tales are suggesting that are the best things to do for ourselves in our lives. Does that make sense? So, yep, I can hear an excavator starting up outside. So I have to... we've got 1.5 minutes. So I'm going to have to just do a little bit of blah, blah, blah. I won't start reading anything new. What am I going to say here? That, yeah, just at the end of the day, fairy tales are important. Solutions are all around very practical. They're not very... and the true solutions are rewarding in a spiritual sense, which is between you and that which we can't see. You and God, you and the Creator, you and the universe, you and Mother Nature, and so on and so forth. You and Spirit. And, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So, I don't know. It's up to us. It's up to you. It's up to the individual to do the right thing. And usually the right thing is not necessarily worthy of praise, but do it anyway. So read those fairy tales to the kids. Okay, well, thanks so much for tuning in. I love you guys, and we'll see you at the next one.